All right, so let's go and do some more examples using the quadratic formula. So we have 10x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. So our first step is that we just need to identify a, b, and c. It's already in the right form, and we're on page 49 of our workbook. So looking at this, here a is going to be 10. B here is a negative 1. And c here is a negative 3. So we're going to pull out our quadratic formula. And keep in mind, this will be on the formula sheet when you take the test. It'll be on that formula sheet in problem number 1. That's where I put all the formulas there. So you don't need to have this on your cheat sheet or anything like that. You already have this formula. So let's go ahead and plug in. So in this thing, wherever I see a B, I'm going to plug in a negative 1. Wherever I see an A, I'm going to plug in a 10. And wherever I see a C, I'm going to plug in negative 3. So, well, there's two spots 10 goes. Goes here and goes here. And then B here is this negative 1 that goes here and negative 1. Then C is negative 3 that goes here. So let's see if we can start simplifying this. So it'd be x equals, the opposite of negative 1 is 1 plus or minus. Let's get that number under the square root. So we pull out a calculator. Oh, that's kind of weird. There we go. So we're going to have a negative 1 squared minus 4 parentheses 10 parentheses negative 3. Oops, the wrong key again. So let me try that again. Hit enter. It's 121. 2 times 10 is 20. Now we can actually take the square root of 121. So that's going to be 1 plus or minus 11 over 20. So we can split that out as two answers. X equals 1 minus 11 over 20, or 1 plus 11 over 20. So here we're going to get a negative 10 over 20. And that's going to reduce to a negative 1/2. On the second part, we're going to get 12 over 20. And you can then reduce that by 4. And that will give us 3/5. So our two answers here are negative 1/2 and 3/5. All right, let's have a look at number 2. Now remember, whenever you're using or want to use the quadratic formula, you need to get 0 on one side. So the first thing before I do anything else here is I need to get 0 on one side. And the easiest thing here to do is to subtract 3x from both sides. So that's going to give us 3x squared minus 3x plus 5 equals 0. And now we're just going to identify A, B, and C. A here is 3. B is -3. C here is 5. And then we're just going to stick this into the quadratic formula. A here would be 3. So we'll stick that here and here. B is -3. So we'll stick that here and here. And if you need to cheat here, kind of go back over here. You can kind of read off your quadratic formula here. And then C here is 5. So we're going to stick that here. So let's start simplifying this. The opposite of -3 is 3. And let's put that part in the calculator. Oh, it's -51. And then 2 times 3 is 6. So when we have a negative in the square, we need to write this in terms of I. So we're going to rewrite that as 3 plus or minus I square root of 51. And you're not going to be able to break down the square root of 51. In fact, if you try here, I take the square root of 51. Calculator's just going to give me the same thing back because we can't break it down any further. Now, we have a couple ways we can write the answer. Sometimes you'll see it written this way. So that's one way. Sometimes they'll have you actually split it out by terms. So if I take 3 over 6, that reduces to 1/2. And then I would have I square root of 51 over 6. I can't write a 2 here because that 6 actually has to go into both of those terms. So if I wrote a 2 here, that would be incorrect. It would not be the same answer. So just a quick comment on here. You might have realized in number 1, we could have solved that by factoring. Whereas number 2, it doesn't factor. You have to use the quadratic formula. So what I tell folks is students will ask, well, when should I factor and when should I use the quadratic formula? Well, if they specifically tell you solve the problem by factoring, then you got to do it by factoring. But if they don't tell you, they just say solve. And I would say generally, if you can see how to factor it within a minute, then go ahead and factor it. But if not, just like here, number 1, you could use the quadratic formula. It's still going to get you the answers. But sometimes it might be easier to go through the quadratic formula rather than spinning your wheels for 5 to 10 minutes trying to figure out how it factors. All right, let's move on to number 3. And now we do not want to use any fractions in the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula, it's messy by itself. Fortunately, working with an equation. So one thing we're allowed to do is to multiply both sides by the LCZ. So before we do anything, what I want to do here is take each of these terms on both sides and multiply it by the LCD. And the LCD of 2 and 3 is 6. So we're going to be multiplying every term on both sides by 6. And this is called clearing out fractions. That's exactly what we want to do before we start trying to mess with this thing. Because now when I take 6 times a half, that's 3. That gives me a 3x squared. 3 goes to 6 twice. 2 times 2 is 4, so that's 4x. And 6 times 2 is 12, so that's minus 12. 6 times 0 is 0. And now we've got a much more decent, handleable problem we can handle with. So thank goodness, right? And well, the way just look terrible with those fractions. So go and use that trick. Multiply by the LCD to clear out the fraction before you start using the quadratic formula. So now we're ready to plug in. So here, my A is going to be 3. So just stick that in wherever you see A. My B here is going to be a positive 4. And C is negative 12. Kind of nice about C, you only have to stick it in one spot. So let's go ahead and start cleaning this up. So this is going to be equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root. All right, so let's see if we can simplify this thing inside here. So again, I'm going to use the calculator. Just type in what's underneath that square root into the calculator. That's 160. And then that's all over 2 times 3 is 6. Well, let's see if we can simplify the square root of 160. And probably some of you are guessing, yeah, we can simplify that. And sure enough, that's 4 square root of 10. So now, one thing you want to notice here, we can actually do some reducing. Because that's 6 on the denominator. I can think of that as a 2 times 3. In the numerator, 4, I can factor out 2 out of those 4s. Okay, it would help if I actually factored out on the second one. And so what's going to happen with these 2's, they're going to divide out. So that gives us our answer. Negative 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 10 over 3. So that's one way you could see it. Or, again, sometimes they might write it as 2 separate terms, as negative 2/3 plus or minus 2 square root of 10 over 3. So either answer would be fine. Now, I'd like to do one more example with you because you know me, I can't stand not using all the real estate. So let me go ahead and make up an example here. So we have 2x minus 3 times 3x plus 1 equals 5. Now, before I do anything here, I need to get this thing in the right form. I have to get into the form looking like this. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go and FOIL. Product the first, 6x squared. Product the outers, it's 2x. We go and do the inners. Negative 3 times 3x is negative 9x. And negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. And that's equal to 5. Combining like terms, 2x minus 9x is a negative 7x. And now I'll need to bring that 5 over. So we have to have 0 on one side. So let me subtract 5 from both sides. So we'll have 6x squared minus 7x minus 8 equals 0. And now we're ready to use the quadratic formula. So here are my 6. That's my A. This negative 7 is my B. And C, let's see, I think we were doing that in blue. So let me grab that. I see here's negative 8. So now we're going to work on simplifying. This is going to be 7 plus or minus. Oh, I want to use a calculator there. On the bottom, we'll have 12. But let me grab a calculator so we can get that stuff underneath the square root. Clear that. Negative 7 squared minus 4 parentheses 6 parentheses negative 8. That's 241. Let's see if we can break that down. And nope, we can't. So we're not able to break this down. And so this is really as far as we can go with the problem. And again, sometimes you'll see them put the answer together like this. So you might see it written this way, or they might split these out into two separate terms. Again, either answer is correct.